See, this is where peer review is a great thing. If I didn't have you, Peter, I would have been talking for God knows how long on mute. So, welcome everyone. After getting us on LinkedIn Live and also on YouTube Live, now we are coming live with our Agile Genesis podcast. And today we have a very, very special guest speaker. We have Peter Borsella, not only a collaborator, a significant influence in the Agile community, also the CEO and president of Winnow Management, and a very, very dear friend of mine. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Ernesto. Appreciate the opportunity.
And today we are going to talk about a very exciting topic, one that is very dear to me, and that is about Agile transformations. And when we were thinking about the right individuals that could perhaps help us have this conversation in a rich way, your name was top of the list, and we were lucky enough to have you available, Peter. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And let's talk about that. Let's dive right into it, right? One of the things, Peter, that is also worth mentioning, I during the introduction mentioned that we collaborate a lot. And just to debunk that notion that the Agile community is divided, or that there are the battle of the frameworks, or that different companies are essentially working in silo. That, from firsthand experience, I can attest is absolutely not the case. You are the CEO of Winnow Management. I am the CEO of Agile Genesis, and we are in constant communication and ways to help each other in delivering quality services to our clients. And one of those services are primarily around Agile transformations.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, well, when I look back at our history, Ernesto, I think that was one of the things that first connected us. We both have gone through on the ground Agile transformations where we were engaged. And that immediately allowed us to connect and start sharing different experiences and different ideas. And that was many years ago, right? And even today, right, we still are exploring some of the variables, right, that different types of organizations might need to account for.
And when you say years, you're being humble. It's been over a decade, possibly getting into the plural version of that soon, right? That's how long it's been. And over the years, we've seen patterns. We've seen challenges that organizations have had in this area of Agile transformation. So let's first, for our audience, define what an Agile transformation is, not as per the dictionary, but our version. What's your take on what is the difference between adapting Agile or learning how to be Agile versus an Agile transformation?
Mm-hmm. Well, keyword transformation as opposed to Agile, because I think there's a, dare I say, a common misunderstanding or maybe a certain perception that often gets missed during what we might call a transformation. When I think about transformation, it's by definition, right? Something's being transformed. It's being changed from something to something different. And when we change our practices, is that a true transformation or not? Or is it more something that should lead us to change how we think and who we are? If I go on an exercise program, let's say, and I go and I do the activities prescribed in the exercise program, but I haven't changed the way I think about it, and I'm doing it grudgingly, and I don't really understand why I'm doing it, but I'm doing it anyway because I'm supposed to do it, I might see some changes, but would I be completely transformed? And I believe the answer to that is no.
So why do we call it an Agile transformation? Why don't we call it an Agile adoption? Why don't we call it learning Agile? Usually the two go hand in hand. When we say Agile, hey, let's engage in an Agile transformation. Why the term now that we understand what it is?
That's a good question. I think it sounds much more appealing and dynamic, and there might be a sense of accomplishment when you pursue something like a transformation as opposed to an adoption. So there's certainly an appeal to something that's more transformative, of course. But I think still, Ernesto, and I would appreciate if you've seen the same thing. Um, Sometimes practices can lead us to transformation. If we change the way we do something, over time, it could get us to think and ask questions and say, hey, you know what? I think I'm starting to see why this might lead us to something even more transformational. So you can start with practices possibly, or you can start with the thought process about, hey, how do we have to change who we really are, right, to take the next steps. So when I look at the, if you will, Ernesto, the selling of transformation services, I think what I've seen oftentimes is they focus on the doing, and there's a big gap when we don't focus on. But let's look at your behavior, how you view the world. I mean, I like to look at agile almost more as a philosophy, right? That than a set of practices, because we know the agile umbrella, right, refers to a way of thinking about things. It doesn't tell us exactly how to go about doing things. Now, the doing is important, of course, but if we don't align that with the transformed thinking, I think we're going to miss the boat on that. So I think the word, why that word sounds a lot more appealing to me. If I let me use my exercise program, right, I might choose an exercise program that's called, transforming you, right? I might choose that one over adopting a new exercise pattern, right?
And I like that analogy, right? The idea that we can do this in steps and eventually build up the appetite to become that which the steps are reinforcing for us. So if you start out with the fact that, hey, I went to the doctor and the doctor said, if I don't completely change how I'm living, I'm not going to be around for long. And that includes healthy diet, that includes exercise, that includes releasing stress or being more mindful. And that's a transformation about how I live in order for me to be able to accept, to be able to benefit to the maximum potential of what the doctor's recommendations can offer. And that's how I also view this aspect of a transformation, right?
Yeah,
It's not to say that if you want to apply Scrum at a team focus for one team, that's bad. That's a good thing, right? That's better than doing nothing. And in fact, it's a good thing to start to learn lessons from that. And then if you like what you got out of that, then why not do it to the next team? Why not do it twice? Why not do it four times?
right,
And at that point, you begin to transform how those teams think together and how the organization itself is transforming itself.
right, right. So, you asked the question about, why transformation and that, and I know that, one of the things that we want to discuss today is the steps, and I think we should talk about that a bit. I just want to make sure that we could spend a few minutes at least exploring. I think that's a great question. I think for our audience too, right, to ask yourself, what does that mean to move through a transformation? Do you have a picture of where you want to be, right? That you need to move towards. Is transformation something that just happens and you don't know where it's going? Well, I think in an agile transformation, you are expecting it to lead to some destination.
I love that, especially in a mature agile industry that we're in now, or stage of agile that we're in. It's really purposeful. It used to be agile was experimental, and then it became a competitive advantage. And today, it's about keeping up. Right? If you're working in the old-fashioned way and you're not thinking incremental delivery, you're not thinking iterative, you're not customer centric, you're not observing and improving how your teams are working, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
And now it's a matter of keeping that competitiveness, and Agile is the preferred tool as far as how we work and collaborate. So when we go into an organization, and this is Peter and Ernesto's experience, and by the way, for the folks watching, we didn't rehearse this. This is literally us talking about how and what we do. And when we go into an organization, Peter, what's the first step? What's the first conversation? What do you just propose? How do we know
Yeah.
what we're doing when it comes to a transformation, or whether we're doing a
Yeah.
transformation? What's
And
your
and
take?
what I like about this and working with you, Ernesto, is because this is unrehearsed, and sometimes when we discuss the answers to questions, we realize we have different answers. So this could prove interesting. Not sure. So the first thing I want to know is why. What problems are you trying to solve? What's keeping you up at night? What makes you think that you need to do something different? And the motives behind it, coupled with the improvements that you're trying to make, or the heartaches that you're trying to avoid, or to put to rest. That can lead us to understand that frame of reference that can then help us make some recommendations on what to do next. And interestingly, as you pointed out, Ernesto, we're in such a mature space now that to even ask the question, well, why? Why are you interested in moving to something that's more agile? Sometimes that gets surprised looks in response, like, well, of course, everybody's doing this, right? We certainly have to, stay with the times, but I suspect there's more to it than that, right? They're looking for something, right? And that's what I want to know first. What do you say?
It's funny you bring that. That brings to mind something I recently wrote about. I had, in representing some of the merger and acquisitions work, and one particular client was very inquisitive about, because this particular financial deal had to do with an organization whose um, edge, whose market value was based on their agile and lean practices. And the client's question was, using me as an advisor in this case, well, Ernesto, if agile is so great, why isn't everyone doing it? And what was surprising to me was that I had to actually take a step back and think about that. Why isn't everyone doing that? Of course, to a carpenter with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I had to do some reflection, and think about the potential bias in there. But the idea that how you ask that question today has changed over the years.
Mm,
Before it was, well, what is Agile? Or what's it going to do for me? Now it's about, why isn't it the standard, right? And but that also brings up a quite interesting um, challenge, and it's the one you mentioned, Peter, is defining the problem. What are you trying to solve, right? As you and I know, you can't buy Scrum and plug it in. It's not something you buy off the shelf. You mentioned Agile as a philosophy, and Scrum is a framework, and it's about practices that build muscle memory over time. So defining the problem, a half stated, or a problem defined is a problem half solved. So going in blind and simply applying these processes or frameworks could not have the intended outcome. Yeah? Tell us about what you're seeing in that sense.
yeah, very, very much so. Very much so. So I go way back to our early days, Ernesto, and first learning about some of the practices, right, so associated with agile thinking. And Ken Schwaber, right, the co-founder of Scrum, uh, working with him in those early days, right, he said something that still sticks with me. Now, at that time, we were looking at discussions where we moved away from something more traditional, like waterfall, let's say. Right, waterfall is not bad. This isn't a waterfall bashing discussion. It's just it's a way of of working, right? And I remember him saying, um, if waterfall works, if waterfall is working for you, then keep using it. But why would you change if things are going well? And so if we ask those questions, those probing questions, is it possible that we could determine, you know what, this isn't a traditional versus agile problem that they're experiencing. It's a vendor contract problem, let's say, that they're experiencing. And it has nothing to do with whether they're more agile or not. It has everything to do with their legal arrangements that have been set up. I mean, it's possible, right? That they could be doing so well, but they think by moving to agile, they have to do that, right, in order to stay current and all those other things. Now, in all honesty, I have found that to be very rare. Finding an organization that couldn't benefit, right, from becoming more agile. But why isn't there more of that? Well, it's hard, and then second of all, it's I have to accept the possibility that for some they believe everything's going pretty well, for them, and there's no pressure. I mean, let's go back to John Cotter, right, and leading change. What are the big reasons for this? Uh, Active desperation and visionary leadership. So active desperation points to a whole bunch of problems that we're having. But what if everything's going well? Then maybe it takes some visionary, right, to say, hey, but we could be even better, right? Even if I don't have a list of heartaches, we think there's still opportunity for us to be even better. And can going through an agile transformation reveal to us some of those opportunities that maybe have been hidden using our current approach?
Tell me if this sounds familiar to you. Um, I rarely have a first engagement with an organization who says, "Hey, Ernesto, everything's going great, but we want it to go better." I
Yeah.
can't think of one, right? Usually, we have X or Y issues, and I'm being kind, right? Sometimes organizations are simply in very very challenging situations, and we got to fix this now. Whether that is lack of alignment, the teams are not working on the strategy that we set up, and we don't know why, and we need to fix that, or whether it's we simply are not delivering. We've haven't had a successful delivery for the past 3 months, and or whether it's the fact that we got a deadline coming up and we know we're not going to meet that deadline, so we need all the help we can get in trying to meet that.
Yeah.
There are many many different scenarios, but those tend to be at the top. There are probably more. We could spend a whole day on that conversation, right? The challenges that we tend to address during transformations. But then something interesting happens. When we engage and the customers begin to see the benefits of how they're working and that this has helped them in solving some of those challenges, then we get those follow-ups that are about, well, can we do it for this team? This team is working well, but from what we've seen here, we can do it there and they could be better. Can we do it for this department? And so on and so forth, right?
Right.
So maybe that idea that to Carter's model, that the burning platform, that tipping point that gets us to action is always a pain point. And we need to discover what that is in those initial conversations, in those assessments, so that
Yeah.
we can get to the root cause. And when we address those, then we begin to have those small wins that can build to something more
Right.
with our teams.
Yeah. Yeah. And so look, so here's the underlying reason for my comment about, hey, maybe you don't need to become more agile. For all the years we've been doing this, Ernesto, I've run into one organization where I had to say, you know what, you don't need us. Only once in all these years. But the reason why I take that attitude, uh, it's really twofold. So one part of it is I want to help the organization identify, in addition to that first question, so what are the problems you're trying to solve? Identify what are the things that are going really well too. And the second part of that is, just because you're going through an agile transformation doesn't mean you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So can we keep the stuff that's going well and focus on the things that are causing us more pain, and figure out that transformation approach, right? That is going to not destroy the good things that have been helping the organization.
That's a great point, Peter, because I often get on the horn about the fact that, hey, we call, for example, Scrum a framework. When I
Mm.
think of a framework, I think of a scaffolding. I grew up in New York City. I know you did as well. We both now live in Florida. But there are plenty of buildings on the constructions with the scaffolding first, shaping that building. And the idea that the framework is there to give you the basic shape, and that those practices and techniques that already work for you and that have made you successful are the windows or the colors of the wall or the rendering. Those details should remain, because what Agile and Scrum are offering you are that particular shape that you are going to adapt your framework, that you're going to adapt your practices and techniques against.
Mm. I love the scaffolding analogy. I'm going to steal that if you don't mind.
All
Uh,
yours.
so, coming from, so let me, if I can add something, some additional perspective. Coming from New York, I think about a milk crate. So we see them lying on the side of the interstate. And here in Florida, I think about an orange crate. Right? It's a box that's sturdy. It can hold a lot, but the top is open, which means you got a lot of space in there to do that building that you're talking about, right? It also means we have that all that space to maneuver in figuring out how to solve our own problems. But you can't destroy the scaffolding. You can't destroy the sturdy box itself. Once you start knocking pieces out, it becomes dangerous. It starts to collapse. You lose the integrity, right,
I
of that
love that.
framework, if you will.
I love that. I often refer to those as the training wheels, right? We don't want to fall off the bike right out the gate. We want to be able to stay the course for a while until we feel comfortable. And that's what many of the frameworks offer us as well.
Yeah, and that's why I like your scaffolding analogy, because ultimately, once the building is established, you could start dismantling the scaffolding, right?
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
have the solid structure in place and you know how it works and how it operates.
And this is when I call that stage, which is, to be transparent, rare.
Yeah.
It's an organization that has matured to the level that this is in their DNA. It's like breathing. We don't know how we do it. We just do it, right? And that's a post-agile organization. That's an organization that is simply doing things so dynamic, so agile. They are now coming up with different ways to do that on their own. But it
Yeah.
takes a while. It takes quite a while. It takes years, not to put any time horizon against that, but to give folks an idea. Right?
Well, maybe a good description of a true transformation, right?
I love that. On
Mm.
the other end, right? When we come out the other end, and that brings me to a point you made earlier, Peter, and that is, you had a conversation with one organization where you say you don't need us. I often see my role in our role as agile coaches to put ourselves out of work as soon as possible. That's my job.
Yeah.
And that is by creating individuals that are autonomous, that are self sufficient. And I can say, you don't need us anymore. You are now well on your way to growing as a self managing, self organizing, agile organization. That is what we all strive for when we engage in an agile transformation, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I agree. And I think there were a few things more satisfying in our line of work, Ernesto, when you could depart and know that they've got it. You know, they can pick up the ball from where we have helped them. You know, and take over from there. Yeah, I agree. I think for us to do anything other than that is contradictory, right, to what we're trying to to promote. Our efforts, right? So training, of course, give you some good, solid foundational information, but on the job coaching, helping teams, on the job, on the floor, even if it's virtual, right? Understanding the particulars they're experiencing, but at the same time, making sure they have the structures in place that if we depart, it's not going to collapse, right? It'll continue on and continue to grow.
And how we do that, I think it's a topic that, if I could put you on the spot right here on a live session, that we'll come back to and explore, because there's quite a lot packed into it. Where does training fit in? How does an agile coach conduct and orchestrates this in such a way that creates that DNA we've been talking about, and eventually gets to the growth and self managing aspect of the organization? So I suggest we put an earmark on that, and we commit to come back during one of our sessions and explore the how, now that we've explored the what.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting, Ernesto.
All right, you've heard it. I've heard interesting, but I saw a head nod from Peter.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on board.
We are on. All right, excellent. Well, Peter, thank you very, very much as always. Peter and I have an inside joke, and that is, we always need to double the time we schedule ourselves, because we love bouncing things off each other so much that it always has more left on the table. So, and that's a good thing. Peter, thank you so much. As always, very insightful.
Much appreciated, Ernesto.
Be well.